and just see what comes to mind, or see if the feeling that shows up immediately in your body reminds you of someone. Then look, then answer the phone. And that kind of practicing, there's many, many other ways of doing it, can help you start to rely on yourself before you look outwardly for validation of whatever you're experiencing. And to me, that's one of the real joyful things about doing this, is it's real self-empowering when you start to get, well, I can ask myself for some piece of information, and it comes from a source that's very reliable and that I can trust.
So it's like testing yourself, and then with the phone call you have an obvious, you get immediate feedback that I was right on, or
that was totally my imagination, that was not at all. And the feedback is so key to learning, is whatever you do, whatever exercises you set up, get feedback for it. So a great one is every day we see a newspaper in the morning with a big picture on the cover. So you can, the night before, you can say, I want to perceive the image that's on the front page of the newspaper. And you just give yourself permission to do it. And you try it, you write down, you draw, and the next morning you get feedback. You circle the parts that might seem connected and maybe cross out the parts that aren't. And that sends feedback to your unconscious. Oh, interesting, I can do this.
So it's a couple things perk up in my mind when we're talking about that exercise, and that is the concept of collective unconscious, which is a Jungian concept. But also more metaphysical, like the Akashic record, which my understanding is sort of the idea that all information is stored in a sort of universal consciousness or a field of information, and even though you're not exposed to it directly in your conscious experience, that when you trust, and like, you know, if you trust the image that comes when you say what's going to be on the paper tomorrow, that there may be, at least that's, to me, that would be a confirmation of that kind of possibility or reality.
And that's some of my sense, that from my experience practicing remote viewing techniques, which are a kind of intuitive sensing, that there really are no limitations to what can be perceived. And it can go in the past, it can go in the future. People have accurately described submolecular structures and atoms, things on the other side of the planet, and that it may be a collective unconscious or something like the Akashic records, with the idea that all information is accessible somewhere outside of time and space. And it seems like our consciousness is able to touch that. And that's kind of mind-blowing, you know, when you think about it, when you start to perceive it, it's like, wow, this is really extraordinary in some way. And so it's fascinating. And one of the things about it is, whatever that information is, it's always filtered through your consciousness. So it never seems to be 100% clear. It always has a little bit of Patrick coming through it when I'm doing something, or you know, whoever's doing the exercise.
But you certainly can see how you mentioned earlier of getting through previous programming and concepts of what human beings are about, and because it almost sounds like it enters into what I call the realm of recognizing, in a sense, our consciousness being very connected to what we might otherwise call God, or you know, that this is outside the frame of human experience or human learning. You know, it's like there is that higher wisdom that you can tap into if you don't put a ceiling on what's possible.
And so some of where you put your mind or your state of mind can affect that. One illustration that I often use is, think of concentric circles, or the center is consciousness, you and I talking. This is what's in our awareness right now. Around that is the unconscious, a larger circle that may include body, functions, and around that is this larger field that's everything else that's accessible. And it's all accessible when you go in, you drop out of that part of your mind.
And so in the book you teach exercises and
lots of hands-on practical tools, you know, ways for people just to do it on a regular basis, and then some explanation about kind of theory and how it works.
Well, I know you've got years of experience with this, with the class that you've taught for years, and I wish we had more time to go into what I consider to be some of the fascinating ways you teach. You touched on it in terms of getting out into nature or going to you know, archaeological significant places, and
many different,
and working with this skill or this ability in those situations where one might say there's a lot of like present information or
And whatever fascinates you in your life, you can turn that into an intuitive practice if you're interested.
Mm-hmm. And so your book will help people move into that
Absolutely.
new fascinating realm of human experience.
Yeah, and so encourage people, I think they've been flashing it on the screen, that my website, joyfulintuition.com, which is the website for this book, kind of links to some of the things that are in the book, and it links to my other activities through my other websites too.
And it would link up to when you offer the class in
Yep.
this as well.
Yep.
And is the book now part of the class? Is that, I would think that would be
Definitely,
a natural thing.
yeah.
Yeah. So anything coming up real soon?
Yeah, well, I guess the next thing is I'm doing some intuitive field trips to sacred sites around Montana coming up this spring.
Well, that's what I was alluding to there.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing to check out on this website.
Yes.
A joyful intuition.
joyfulintuition.com. Yeah.
.com. Well, always interesting to talk with you, Patrick, and we'll have you back you've got some other things coming up later in the summer.
I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk again.
We'll get a chance to visit again about that. So
good. Well, thanks for having me, Will.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.